Imagine this. You're an Airbnb host sitting on a comfy $2.6 million property in sunny Los Angeles, sipping on your morning espresso when suddenly, BAM! You realize your guest hasn't paid rent in 542 days. Yup, that's right, an Airbnb host, now bear with me, I'll probably butcher the name, Dr. Sascha Jovanovic, who we'll call Dr. J, has a freeloading guest who hasn't paid rent in almost a year and a half. And yes, they went to court, but the results weren't what you'd expect. How did that happen? Well, we'll get to that and we'll break down how this disaster could have been avoided and what to do if you're stuck with a squatter. But first, I'm Brandon Meyer. I'm here to help you avoid becoming the next squatter victim. Who am I to teach you? Well, I make over $40,000 a month on Airbnb and I build that income in under 12 months. I navigate the wild world of Airbnb hosting and I learned all the hard lessons so you don't have to. All right, here's what happened. The genius doctor owns a luxurious estate in Brentwood, Los Angeles with a guest house he built to host Airbnb guests. Everything seemed fine until he realized his guest Elizabeth hadn't paid rent for 6 months and continued not to pay for 542 days. Initially, Elizabeth booked the guest house as a short-term rental on Airbnb for 6 months. But once that period ended, she refused to leave. She claimed that health and safety issues, such as mold and an unpermitted shower, prevented her from moving out. The two parties entered a rental agreement that allowed her to stay at the guest house for $1,150 per month, but Elizabeth never paid that rent either. She argued that the great doc couldn't legally collect rent because the guest house didn't have the necessary permits. Like most savvy entrepreneurs, he tried to evict the guest. But there's a plot twist to this story. Dr. J thought he had a slam dunk eviction case, but drum roll please. The court ruled he couldn't evict Elizabeth because the guest house didn't have the proper permits. Instead of giving her the boot, Dr. J was stuck with a non-paying guest because he overlooked some critical details like permits and lease agreements. And unfortunately, Dr. J isn't the only one who has faced this issue. Here are a couple other similar cases. A landlord rented a Palm Springs condo on Airbnb to a guest for 44 days. But when the stay ended, the guest and his brother refused to leave, citing tenant rights under California law. They stopped paying rent after 30 days and threatened to sue the landlord for blackmail and damages, including medical bills. It took months and significant legal fees before the guest finally vacated. In Denver, a guest rented an Airbnb property for a short-term stay. After his booking expired, he refused to leave, exploiting tenant rights and living rent-free. The host had to file an eviction and seek police assistance, incurring significant legal fees in the process. And these cases aren't one-time scenarios, they happen often. So if you're hosting on Airbnb, know that this can also happen to you. Make sure you're prepared and don't let freeloaders turn your property into their rat's nest. Now, back to our friend Dr. J. So, what exactly could Dr. J have done wrong? First off, he built the guest house without a certificate of occupancy, which made it illegal for him to collect rent. Big mistake. Secondly, he underestimated tenant protections in California. Even if guests don't pay rent, the courts may still protect them. And finally, without a lease agreement that clearly specified eviction terms, health standards, and other rules, he was flying blind. Always get it in writing. These critical mistakes left the great doctor high and dry with a freeloading guest and no legal ground to stand on. Now, before I tell you how I would personally deal with squatters and how you can protect yourself, I want to give my opinion on this case quickly, and I'm trying to stay as objective as possible. First off, let me say this. Doing things the right way is crucial if you want to be successful as an Airbnb host. But I have to admit, the motives of these squatters disgust me. Living rent-free in a luxurious estate while pretending to be a victim? That's rat behavior, plain and simple. If you also don't like rats and squatters, hit that subscribe button like you're kicking them out of your property. Now, while the idea of freeloading for over a year might seem like a dream come true to some, there's no denying that it's ethically wrong and downright slimy. A guest refusing to pay rent while exploiting legal loopholes to demand a 6-figure settlement is just the icing on the cake. It's like watching someone steal your pizza and then demand a tip for eating it. But here's the kicker. If Dr. J had done things by the book, with permits, lease agreements, and tenant protections, the guests wouldn't have been able to exploit those loopholes. It's a reminder that you have to dot your I's and cross your T's because believe me, there's always someone ready to take advantage of a gap in your paperwork. Now, you're probably asking yourself, well, what if this happens to me? How can I deal with squatters? Here are some crucial things that you need to consider. Every state has different rules. Make sure you understand local tenant protections and eviction procedures where your property is located. For instance, in California, tenant rights are so strong that even a squatter can transform into a 5-star hotel guest if they stay long enough. Take our example from the landlord from Palm Springs who rented their condo to a squatter who knew California law better than any attorney. He stopped paying rent after 30 days but cited tenant rights to remain for months, costing the landlord significant legal fees. Always have a clear written lease agreement with specific terms. Include clauses that allow for eviction if rent isn't paid. Don't just rely on reviews, perform background checks or require references to ensure you're hosting trustworthy guests. If a guest stops paying rent, take immediate action. Document all communication, payment issues, and violations. This will strengthen your case if you need to go to court. Short-term rentals under 30 days often fall under different laws than long-term leases. By keeping guest stays to under 30 days, you can ensure tenant laws don't convert short-term guests into long-term freeloaders. So what's the moral of the story? Make sure your permits are in order and take the lease seriously. Because while squatting rent-free might sound like a rat's dream, it's your nightmare. Follow these tips and you'll be much better prepared to handle any freeloading guests or squatter situations. You just learned some STR science. And for all the new people out there who are thinking about starting their own Airbnb business, if you want to leave the 9-to-5 rat race and become financially free, join me in my course and I'll teach you how to launch your first Airbnb in just 45 days. Thanks for watching and we'll see you in the next video.